Buongiorno, szép délutánt, good afternoon everyone. Please give a big hand to our guest today, Generale Roberto Vannacci. Possiamo forse sederci? My name is Mihály Rosonczy-Kovács. I'm an analyst of Polish and Italian politics, and I'm the international director at the think tank Nézőpont Institute. And I had this privilege and honor to be the moderator of this discussion, which I think might go into history, not because of me, but if the evolution of the European and Italian politics goes as one of the possible scenarios, might be historical. So the first open appearance of Generale Roberto Vannacci. If you allow me, I would give a little presentation of the general. If I would reel off all his merits in all the fields that he has covered in his still young age, I would consume half of this discussion, so I will try to be very brief. Born in Italy, also lived in Paris, and by the way, a language genius. Yesterday, he started to learn some Hungarian words, so it's possible that you already learned Hungarian through the night.
Not exactly, but I will try to do so, at least for some words.
So we remain in English. So a military person, a soldier, a general, commander of various missions in the Iraqi war, commander of deployment of Italian paratroops in Somalia, Rwanda, and different countries, for which in 2018 he got the Legion of Merit, a Bronze Cross from the US for his efforts against the Islamic State. And this career could have been already a glancing one in itself, but in 2023 he issued a book with the title Il mondo al contrario, The World Upside Down, which shook the Italian public discourse. In this book, he grasped that feeling that so many of us can perceive in the last decades, that what is normal is called not normal, beauty is called ugly, ugly is called beauty. And in very clear and direct language, chapter after chapter, he took the notions so dear to us as family, homeland, and also the issues that lately dominate the public discourse in Europe, such as migration or LGBTQ and so on, and gives a very clear stance, which I think is the stance of the silent majority that wants to go back to the normality. I would say it's a catechism of the common sense. It's a must, by the way, soon to be published also in Hungarian. To say that a witch hunt was launched against the general by the mainstream leftist media is to say nothing. At least it gave also good publicity of the book. But the extent of this witch hunt was really incredible. Even in his military career, he was suspended. So he was a victim really much more than on a political scale. It was almost an annihilation. And it was a very courageous step, and also a step wanted by so many, that he entered the political life in 2024, last year, being a candidate on the list of the Lega, a very healthy and strong alliance, and he received the second most preferential votes in the European election. A big applause, please, in a country of 60 million people. Right after Giorgia Meloni, but in brackets, Madame Meloni started in all the lists, whereas General led only 2 of the lists, and so proportionately it was even closer to Meloni. And not only he entered the European Parliament, but he became one of the most important politicians of Patriots for Europe. We will come back to this part at the end of this discussion, but since we have an expert of military, I would like to, also referring to our title, first to ask him, before going to the actual state of the war, to give us a general recipe to the European geopolitics. Assuming that these countries are doomed to collaborate, which I hope everyone is everyone agrees with thesis, to assuming that there is a need of collaboration of the European countries. What, according to you, the golden rules of our security and geopolitics are in 2025 with the current status of the world?
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for inviting me. My English is quite Rush, but it's better than my Hungarian, so we will keep on speaking in English. And I will just introduce that I'm talking to you as a personal, and my thought does not reflect any position of political parties or institutions. So I will give you my assessment of the situation, my personal assessment of the situation. Regarding the geopolitics in the world, you know perfectly that the world is changing. It's changing from a unilateral US-led world to a multipolar world. And we have several actors in this changing. Europe should be one of these actors. At the moment, in my opinion, is a very marginal and peripheral actor because Europe renounced to this position and renounced to be a major protagonist in this changing for many reasons. And I will try to feature why Europe is absent from the major changes that are going on in the last period. Europe is in a crisis. Is in a crisis of identity, is in an economic crisis, and is in a political crisis. And it is in this crisis because of the last 20 years of politics carried out by the social democratic parties inside Europe that have dominated the politics inside the European Union. And I will start to talk about the economic crisis because it engenders a lot of other sectors. And I will start to talk about it taking into consideration a very important document that is very often quoted. And this is the report on competitiveness and productivity made by President Draghi, the former president of the European Bank, on the request of Ms. von der Leyen. And in this report, Mr. Draghi features that Europe is in a crisis because of three external factors. First of all, globalization. So the fact that other major actors came inside the trade world made Europe lose his position as a major economic actor. The second factor is energy. So the fact that Europe renounced at its major energy provider, that was Russia, causes lots of problems in the energy price and in the energy market inside Europe. And the third external cause is the geopolitical instability. Very, very roughly, the war that are very close to the European continent, especially the war between Russia and Ukraine and the instability and the war in the Middle East. So because of the three factors, Europe is in a crisis and we should find some solution to this crisis. So at least we should tackle these problems. So talking about globalization, if globalization is a factor of crisis, probably going toward a more protected market could be part of the solution. And tariffs, we have talked about tariffs a lot in the last days, could be an instrument of this solution. Energy. If energy is a problem for Europe, and the fact that Europe has renounced to buy the energy from Russia, we should at least try to find a solution to this problem. Talk again with Russia, having a discussion, re-establish normal linkage, normal relations, because if this is a problem, we need to fix it, if we don't want to continue on this crisis. And the third, the war. If the war is a problem for Europe, we need to stop the war. If we don't stop it, we will never fix the problem. Or if we take in account these three causes, Europe is not trying to fix any one of these problems. In the globalization, they are against the tariffs, which is an instrument of, trying to fix the globalization issue. If we talk about energy, we just approved yesterday, well, it was not approved, but Ms. von der Leyen said that she wants to have a complete embargo on the Russian gas until 2027. And you know that Russia is still one of the major providers of gas of Europe. So if we close this line of gas to Europe, we will still go in a deeper crisis than we are right today. And the war. So what is the Commission saying? We will not stop the war. We will continue fighting until it is necessary. We will launch a plan of rearmament in Europe because we don't want to find a peace. We just want to continue the war because we want the just peace. Just think about what is just peace. It has never existed in the humanity. Never in the humanity you have reached a condition of a just peace. If you think about that, the peace is the peace of the winners. It's not a just peace. But there is a problem in this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And I will tell you from the moment that it is not a conflict between Russia and Ukraine, but probably we will touch on later on. That if we try to reach the peace of the winner, this conflict could spiralize into a nuclear conflict, which is a risk that we don't want to tackle. We don't want to arrive at this moment. So the only peace that is conceivable is the rational peace. It's a peace where each party will have to give up something. It will cost to the two parties, but the cost will be less than the cost of continuing the war. So this concept has not been perceived by the European Union. The European Union is talking only about ammunition, weapons, armament, and continuing to fight. And there is another factor that probably is not clear to the European Union. You know, the European Union is not, doesn't want to accept that Russia will dictate some of the condition of this peace. But in the history of the humanity, the ones that can dictate the condition are the ones that are winning the war. And if we take the indicators that we have right now, Russia is winning the war. So the Russian army is going forward in Ukraine, has occupied part of the territory, and in 3 years' time, we were not able to have any tangible and effective results in this war against Russia. It does mean that we need to change the strategy. You know what Einstein was saying about being crazy? Being crazy means that we continue to do the same things, expecting different results. So it is exactly what we are doing in Europe. Doing the same thing, continuing the war, continuing to rearm, continuing to giving military support to Ukraine, and expecting different result than the result that we have had in the last 3 years. So it is not acceptable. If we want to change something, we need to change the strategy, we need to change the approach, and we need to think what is beneficial to Europe. Because as a politician, I am elected and I am paid to do the interest of my electors. I'm not paid to save the world or to save the humanity. I leave this task to people more intelligent and clever than me. So I am elected to do your benefits or the benefit of my electors. And the fact of continuing this war is not on the interest on any European citizen.
You mentioned that it's not Ukraine that is one of the sides. So who are the fighting sides? And what is your general assessment of the current war? You said that Russia is winning, but once again, could you just, who are the sides? What are the resources from a military point of view? And what the strategy that you mentioned, the more wise strategy, according to you, could be? Feel free to walk around. I know that the general likes very much to be around this audience.
So, what I'm going to say was considered a blasphemy until some weeks ago. But there are many geopolitical experts that are continuing to say the same thing, so I will be very direct. In my opinion, the war that is going on between Russia and Ukraine, in the reality, is a war between USA and Russia. And the war has an objective to reach. So the USA objective at that time was to downsize the role of Russia as a major global actor and to downsize it until a regional actor. The second objective was to detach Russia from Europe. Because if you keep together a very capable industrial capability, as we have in Europe, with infinite resources that you have in Russia, you made up a competitor. And the USA never had the appetite to have a competitor in Europe. And to do so, they wanted to expand NATO until the Russian borders. It is exactly what happened from the 90s to nowadays. And they wanted to stop the acquisition of energy from Europe to Russia. So these were the objective from the US side. From the Russian side, the objective were to maintain the level of global actor in the war, to protect its own interest of a sphere of influence that they have always had, to protect the economy continuing to exporting the resources, and at the end to protect the minorities, the Russian minorities around the world. And this war has been played in the Ukrainian battlefield. And how we have the evidence that the two actors were USA and Russia? Because the ones that right now are talking about peace are USA and Russia. So the same actors that were playing the role in the beginning of the war are playing the role now we are talking about peace. And Ukraine is a kind of a spectator in this play. The major items are discussed by President Trump and President Putin, by the Secretary of State of the United States and Mr. Lavrov in Russia. And it is not only about peace, because the discussions are about the Arctic, are about the economy, are about on how to have economic linkage or linkage between the US and Russia. Because in my opinion, the strategic objective is to try to detach, to separate Russia from China. China is the more concerning competitor with regard to USA. And if you want to tackle China, it's better to have an isolated China than having a China connected to Russia. So that's why they are discussing, and trying to reach a peace in Ukraine is part of the maneuver to have a new dialogue between USA and Russia. Europe, in this game, is totally absent. It's not present. That's why I was telling to you that it's a marginal actor. It doesn't play any role. It doesn't participate to the discussion. It is not present. In the contrary, we try to jeopardize the discussion and trying to say that we need to continue the war, we need to continue fighting, we need to continue to support Ukraine in a military way. So you realize that nowadays Europe is totally marginalized as a major actor of what is going to happen in the world in the next weeks, in the next months. What is the situation in the field? Well, the situation in the field is quite clear. The Russians have consolidated their position, and they very slowly continue to advance in the Ukrainian territory. So if we don't reach an understanding now, what we are going to reach in few weeks or in few months will be worse than what we can achieve now. So there is no reason to try to postpone a peace treaty or the condition for having negotiation. We should rush as Europeans to try to find a solution. And if you realized when the Ukrainians were convinced to move toward the solutions, when the United States threatened to stop the military aid, you know, there are no war with infinite resources. At a certain moment, the resources are the one that dictate the battlefield. And if you want someone to negotiate, you need to let him understand that if he doesn't negotiate, it will be worse. And you push them to negotiate. That's the way of, you know, international relations work. And if we don't understand that, if we don't push to negotiate, the negotiation will be postponed and the situation will be worse and worse again if we postpone it, we will continue to be something that an actor that jeopardizes the situation and is acting against its own interest. So that's why I think the period we are living, it's very interesting and critical at the same time, because as European, we are absent from a major chessboard, and we are not eager to be part of it. And as a European politician, we are trying to push in this direction very hardly, and we hope to have an influence and an impact in what is gonna happen in the next week.
Do we have any cards, possible cards in the hand? If we had a wiser leadership on a European scale, what would have been the cards that we could use?
Well, we have some cards. We have cards in the military sphere and sector, because we are also providing a part of the military support to Ukraine. We have cards in the energy sector, because we are buying a lot of energy from Russia. And I remind you that who closed the pipeline from Russia to Europe were the Ukrainians. So now we are just buying liquefied gas from Russia, but we can play a role on letting understand that we can be an actor in the energy sector. And we are an actor also in the political sector. So depending what we announce, what is going to be our compass for the future, we can influence the things in the world. But nothing of these three sectors have been engaged by the European Commission. In the contrary, we are leading to the opposite direction, almost committing a suicide of Europe. So that is what is not understandable, in my opinion.
Yes, because as far as I see, or one could see now, Europe takes the completely the direct opposite direction than America, Russia, China, almost as if all the world wanted peace, other than the majority, so at least to this point, the majority of the Europeans. That's why we cannot use these cards, because we are talking a different language. We are talking, the majority of Europe is talking the language of the war, whereas the world started to talk the language of peace.
Exactly, exactly. So we are talking about peace in the world, but Europe is talking war between Russia and Ukraine. And it doesn't want to talk about the solution of the war, but just continuing the war until something happens. I don't know what they expect to happen.
With the exception of Patriots for Europe, we will talk.
We'd accept about Patriots. But you know, we had the visit of the Defense Secretary, the USA Defense Secretary, Mr. Exet, in Europe about 2 months ago. And he said three things very important. He said, it is not likely that Ukraine will be part of NATO. Exactly the opposite that was said in the summit of NATO in 2024. He said that it is not likely that the part of Ukraine that have been conquered by Russia will be given up back. And so we have this position that are quite clear to everybody, but Europe is not giving up. In the contrary, he said another thing. It is out of question to have NATO troops in Ukraine acting under Article 5, which is the mutual defense. And what are we discussing in Europe after this declaration of the Secretary of Defense of the United States? We are talking about sending troops in Ukraine. Exactly the opposite. Under I don't know which rules and which juridical justification, because we don't have any peace accord between Russia and Ukraine, and we cannot just participate to a war which would lead to a direct war between European country and Russia, which is something that nobody wants. And wow, I just wanted to add something. Wow, the war cannot be won, in my opinion. In my opinion, the war cannot be won because there is no European country that is eager and willing to participate to the war. It's very clear. No one in Europe wants to have a direct conflict with Russia. So everybody accepts to provide weapons and military support to Ukraine, but no one wants to die for Kiev. No one. It's very simple. Just ask one of your colleagues, would you be ready to go and fight in Ukraine and to die there? There are thousands of people dying there. It is totally different when you talk about politics and then when you ask people, do you want to go to die there and to risk the life of your own citizen and your own soldiers? So nobody in Europe is eager to participate directly in this war. And if you don't participate in this war, a war against, between Russia and Ukraine cannot be won because of the figures that you have to talk about. The figures are very clear. A big nuclear power with 145 million of inhabitants against a medium regional country that have limited resources, and especially taking account war is not only a question of technology and weapons. War is a question of men, blood, and death. And Ukraine have limited resources. They don't have any soldiers anymore. They have very limited conscription capabilities because they had a lot of losses. And that's the reality. Or if you want to win a war, this war, you must participate, and no one wants to participate. So if you are not able and willing to participate, the war will be lost. There are no other solution. So if you know that the war will be lost, just stop it now. Don't wait. Why do you want to wait? The condition will be worse if you wait. So this is a rational logic that probably in Europe is not understood. And that's why in Europe we have an opposite direction on what should be a clear and clever thinking of the strategy that we should take.
So far we talked about Europe and European countries, but in the title we have the EU, and on purpose I was talking about European countries, but some of you, the students, might question, thinking of this title, wait, war in Ukraine and the EU, which is meant to be an economic alliance. What has to do with war at all? We see, and the general depicted, that it currently is going towards even escalating the war, at least for the leadership of the mainstream European Union politicians. But normally it should be an economic alliance. To what extent? Obviously, I'm not naive, and there is an overlap between security, military issues, and the economy, because the military economy is a part of the economy, and you need security to have thriving economy. But to what extent do you think it's healthy for the European Union to be part of the dialogue in geopolitics and security on the war, and which is the border where it should leave it to NATO or the member states?
Okay, so why Europe should talk with Russia? It's very simple. Geopolitics is a word made of two words. The first is geography, and the second is politics. Geography is not an opinion. Russia is a neighbor of Europe. And you don't choose your neighbor. Your neighbor are like your relatives. You don't choose them. You just have to live with. And it's better to have good relations with your neighbor than having bad relations. So if you have a neighbor, you had better to have good relation with him and try to take advantage of what he can provide. It's very simple. And the second word is politics. Politics. So can you get along with your neighbor even talking about politics, even talking about convergent objectives? So probably we don't have so many convergent objectives between Europe and Russia. So we got along for decades having a buffer zone. And I think it is exactly what Russia and Europe should try to have in the future. So Ukraine was a buffer zone between Russia and European Union. And as long as it has remained as a buffer zone, we never had problems. When it decided to be not anymore a buffer zone, the problem started to raise. Secondly, we talk about rearmament of Europe. Now, one of the major political stream in Europe right now is this rearm Europe, because the major threat is Russia, that it is likely to invade a European country in 3 or 4 years. Mr. Rutte said, Rutte is the Secretary General of NATO. Secretary General of NATO, yes. But just try to take into account the indicators, just to evaluate the figures. Russia is spending in defense in the last year $140 billion. And the European Union spent in the last 12 months 320 billion of euros. So we spend 2.5 more than what Russia is spending. The internal brute product of Russia is less than the internal brute product of Italy, is 1/9 of the internal brute product of Europe. And just take into account that the economy of Russia is based mainly on the exportation of raw materials, energy and raw materials. So they don't have a manufacturing capability as we have in Europe. The population of Russia is 145 million of people that are living in the most extended country in the world. And in Europe, there are about 4,700 million of people living here. So the figures are another thing. The 90% of the countries that are in Europe are also part of NATO. And if you put the expenditure for defense of Russia balanced with the expenditure of defense of NATO, from one side is 140 billion per year, from the other side is 1,300 billion per year. So if you just have played to a kind of tactic game in your computer, you perfectly know if you want to attack someone, you need to be stronger than him. And it is not the case with Russia. So this rearmament plan is not about a defense plan, but it's just a financial and economic plan to try to boost the economy of Germany and in part of France. Germany, because it's the only European country that can make debts, because the other countries are very, very bad in debts. And secondly, because they have the heavy industries that can be boosted by this plan. There is not a security concern behind this plan. It's just an economic plan. And you have seen that this plan is not going very well, because many countries, for example, the Netherlands, have very hardly criticized it, and many other countries have criticized it, because you need to pay for having this plan. And there is another factor that we need to take into account. The big crises in Europe have an end state. The end state is to take the sovereignty from the member states and try to move it to Brussels. Because if you create a crisis, you create a common funding, and the mechanism on how the common funding is working, I give you money, but you will spend it according to my priorities. So I will try to overtake your sovereignty and your right to decide what you do in your country through the priority I'm imposing from Brussels. And it's exactly what we don't want. We want to keep our sovereignty and our right to decide what to do in our member states. So that's why the situation is very complicated, and that's why I think we need to continue to talk each other and to find a middle way in relations that we have. We are in the middle, as European, we are in the middle of two major powers. United States from one side, and we are linked to the United States from 80 years of collaborations, and especially of conversion of objective. We are Western countries. We have almost the same ideal, the same principle. We believe in democracy. We believe in a free world. And on the other side, we have Russia. So you need to negotiate with these two actors, United States and Russia. If you decide not to talk with one of these two actors, you simply lose 50% of the possibility of negotiating. It's simple. So if you decide not to talk with one actor, you lose 50% of the possibility of negotiating. So you lose 50% of your freedom of action. That's simple, like, drinking a glass of water.
There is, however, more and more voices who opt for this dialogue. They are already the third largest group in the European Parliament. There are also other forces beyond them, but this third biggest group is the Patriots for Europe, with a dominant Italian and Hungarian part. From Hungary, Madame Kinga Gál, the first vice president, took a lion's role into establishing it. We don't have too much time. Just very briefly, your personal feelings about this group. How is the atmosphere, and how do you see the strength of this political group? 3 minutes, if possible.
Yeah, the Patriots are the third group in the European Parliament. About 86 parliamentarians from almost every country of Europe, many countries of Europe, with a big participation of France, Italy, Hungary, Austria, and many other countries inside. It is really important, first of all, because in a military term, if you want to influence in a parliament, you need to concentrate the mass. So having a large group, which is the third group in the European Parliament, you concentrate the mass of your combat power, and you can influence the decisions. Secondly, because having a multinational group inside a parliament, but inside many countries, allow you to have an international network. And this international network is the international network of the people that believe in sovereignty of member states. And it takes this principle and ideas and conviction everywhere. And we are in an interconnected world. So we cannot think that we will solve our problem alone. We will need to bring our principle everywhere they can be brought to influence the more that we can the politics, the economy, the social environment, and to have, a kind of international network will be crucial and very, very important. And they have realized, our opponent, that it is happening. It is exactly what is happening. That's why probably I'm here right now, and that's why probably our political leaders meet together before any plenary session in Strasbourg, and that's why we have the same way of spreading out our ideas and our principle around Europe, and not only around Europe, because we have a convergence of ideas and principle also at the other side of the Atlantic. So this is going to be a very, very important and massive community that is influencing the way of the world is shaping in the next week and in the next months and in the next years.
Not only on the European level, but considering the Italian domestic level, from Budapest, with the strength that Lega gains also being member of a big party, it seems that also is stronger to amplify the voice of common sense in Italy. And recently we've seen that in some issues it was able to have a larger influence on the coalition as the proportion. And that is where my last question goes. But before talking about Patriots, I would like to remind you and thank that General Vannacci always takes in defense the Hungarian stance, and he was the one who, for example, said that why Europe hasn't listened to the peace mission of Hungary Prime Minister Orban. It could have reached.
It was the only one trying to have a dialogue with Russia, with China, with Kiev, and trying to establish linkage. The only one when he was president of the European Council. And it was hardly and harshly critiqued because of that, instead of being listened. That's a nonsense.
So thank you, grazie, as a Hungarian elector. And the last question, in Firenze there was the Federal Congress of Lega, and Mr. Salvini closed his speech, or had closing to the speech. He said that my successor is in this hall. Now there were 2,000 members. One of them was you. It means that you have one per 2,000 chance, or a little bit more?
No, it's 1 on 2,000, so we will see. For the moment, I want to be a parliamentarian in Brussels, and I try to do my job as well as I can. That's it. The future, we will see. Thank you very much.
And we have 2 minutes for a question. I was told that, unfortunately, I think it will be one question, because the general has to rush to the airport.
Well, thanks for your discussion. I have at least, I will start with some fact-checking. You said about the Russian gas going to Europe. The percentage of Russian gas going to Europe before war was around 25%. After Russian invasion is going to down to 19. Only 2 countries from the European Union which are still using the Russian gas are Hungary and Slovakia. Also, you were mentioning that Ukrainians stopped the flow of the gas
pipeline.
Yeah, but there was from the start of the invasion, they were still okay with the deals, which ended last year. This is the reason why the Russian gas stopped talking. You mentioned the Draghi report about concurrentness. So at first place, he also mentioning that one of the main problems of the European Union is that the national states are not very interactive. Yeah. I just need to fact check him, because a lot of things which were said are not completely true. And it was mentioning that Hungary is also blocking the money for Czech Republic, Poland, and Slovakia from the help to the Ukraine. Still, they are blocking theirs, but around 200 billions, which are still blocking. And my question, when I'm going to that, you mentioned the rearming process. You said that's more about the Europe trying to boost themselves and supporting war. I don't agree with you, and my question is, what we should as a European Union do if our enemy is in our borders? We should just wait it or be fighting? Because from the general who is saying we want a peace and nobody wants to fight for me is like quite surprising, because always the army guys knew that when it's time to fight, and that time is right now.
Sure. Okay. So, trying to point out about gas. In May and June 2024, Russia was the first provider of gas of Europe. That's the figures that we have. So now it is down south a little bit. It's not the gas that is coming from the pipeline, it's the liquefied gas that Russia is still providing to Europe. The figures are available in the Concilium of Europe page, WISE page. Regarding the defense, I'm not saying that the single member state should not defend themselves. I'm totally against the European army, because the armies are the representative of the national sovereignty. That's the problem. We don't have a national sovereignty at European level. So the only European army that we can have is interoperability. And we know it very well at NATO level. And at NATO level, we have the Article 5 that establishes the mutual support in case of an attack. But it doesn't establish the level of the support that we are giving. As I was talking about, we have the convergence of interest. So I'm totally agreeing with the countries that are close to Russian borders, that they have concern about their security. So they have a very high level of security in this case. But at the same time, I don't think that Portugal is very concerned about Russia, because the geographical position is totally the opposite. As well as probably Lithuania is not concerned about illegal immigration, because it doesn't have this problem. So what is the role of Europe? The role of Europe is to establish a network of connections and then leave the countries to establish with whom they want to collaborate for the convergence of objectives. So I am pretty sure that in the eastern border, there will be many European states that are eager to collaborate in the defense sector because they have the concern of Russia invading them. But it's not the same thing in Spain or in Portugal. And you cannot oblige them, simply because you won't have a Spanish soldier dying for Kiev. It's not going to happen. So it's totally, in my opinion, is totally useless to continue to push on this convention.
The general is a big advocate and fighter of freedom of expression of opinion. I think a big applause to the gentleman who was brave to express. And a big applause to Mr. Roberto Vannacci. Thank you very much.